Welcome to another episode of That's Some Crazy Shit with Kelly and James. My name is Kelly, as always. I say this every single time. And my co-host that I say every single time is Mr. James.
Hey, I'm always Mr. James.
And I'm always Kelly.
And I'm always in the corner studio. Unless we're on the road. We have done one on the road.
We have taken the show on the road before. But I'm so happy to see you again, my friend. And I'm so happy that we are here again doing that some crazy shit. And we've just, this season 7, has been really good with the guests, man. We're just hitting it out of the park. And today is equally as exciting.
Yeah, what do we got?
We've got author, intuitive mentor, trainer for EFT International, Jennifer Moore of Empathic Mastery. Jennifer is an empath, and she even has a podcast. It's called the Empathic Mastery Show podcast. She has she does tapping. We've talked about the EFT tapping before, and she's got like a empathy. What am I trying to say? She's an empath. Empathic Mastery book. She's got all of these things, everything empathic for her. She's big on helping people who are empathic know how to handle that. And she explains to us too what it means, because everybody seems to like empath is like the new thing to be.
It kind of really is. It's like, all of a sudden everyone's an empath. And it's like, well, that's cool. If you are, that's cool. But then it makes you wonder how many people, oh, well, it's cool to be an empath. Oh, I guess I am too. What I mean?
Right. I mean, everybody has feelings and emotions. That doesn't make you an empath, right? So,
right. Exactly.
Let's figure out what that means, which is why Jennifer is such a great guest. So what do you think?
I think we should bring her on.
Let's do it. Oh, I'm sorry. That's your line. Oops, my bad.
Let's do it.
I'm out of script. I'm sorry.
See, we're all live and natural people.
Say it again. I'm sorry.
Let's do it.
Welcome to the podcast. Empathic Master, Jennifer Moore.
So Jennifer, welcome to the show. How are you?
I am really well. Thank you so much for having me, James and Kelly.
So, the name of the show is That's Some Crazy Shit. So I like to ask people, what crazy shit brings you to us?
Oh, well, it's funny. The first thing, I think the crazy shit that brings me to you guys is, for one thing, that I'm part of the Too Sensitive Club, and I've been joking that I need to create a t-shirt that says basically Too Sensitive and Proud of It. Because, I, like so many of the people that I work with and that I've interviewed for my podcast and everything, have been told since I was a really tiny, tiny, tiny person that I'm too sensitive, that I'm overreacting, that I'm taking things too personally, that I'm making too big a deal out of it, that I'm making shit up, that this stuff isn't real. And so, I'm here because, like, so much of the crazy shit that I started feeling and sensing and picking up on when I was from the time I was a little girl, I was being told I was too sensitive or it wasn't real. But you know what? As I kept living and kept researching and kept finding people like you guys, I got to discover that, this stuff is real. So, I could talk about like being 9 and having my first prophetic dream. I could talk about, ghost experiences. I could talk about, just like doing energy healing work and things like that. Like, we could go down all kinds of rabbit holes.
Oh,
so let's start with just the empath stuff. Right?
Yes.
Because I don't think most people, number one, understand what that is. I hear a lot of people use it maybe not correctly, right? It's like the new hot term now.
It
oh,
is.
I'm an
I've been
empath.
joking. I'm joking. I've been joking. Empath is the new black. It's like, it's become so trendy to be identifying as an empath. And the thing is, there's a couple of reasons for this. Number one, it is a term that comes out of science fiction, and it is a term that it's not a clinical term. It's a term that's coming out of science fiction, and basically originally was this idea of people who had these paranormal abilities to both sense other people's emotions and feelings, but also to influence other people's feelings and emotions. And then as we started seeing, like Star Trek episodes, and then of course we had like Deanna Troi, the empath on Star Trek, that sort of became really common in pop culture, where people started identifying. But what you'll find is, because there isn't necessarily a clinically defined meaning, and even if you look in the dictionary, you're just going to basically a term from science fiction, but that there isn't necessarily a commonly accepted definition. I will share my understanding of it, and the understanding that most of the people that I know and talk to and work with also would agree with. And that is that an empath is a person or an animal, or, it can be another, not just a human, but an empath is a being who is so open and sensitive to the energy that is going on in the world around them, that they pick up the thoughts, the feelings, the sensations, and the like energy of the world around them. And this is on a spectrum, in the sense that you can have some people who are just, maybe they go into work and they have a boss who's in a bad mood, and they feel their boss's bad mood. You can also have people who are more sensitive, and it's like they can, you go into the grocery store, and it's like you feel everything in the grocery store. You get on the subway or a bus or something, and you feel everything that's going on. And then you've got people who are so sensitive that they're feeling the ripples across the whole planet. So like, for example, with the hurricane that had come through back in autumn with, in Florida, hitting Florida, there were a lot of people I knew who are really feeling the fear, the despair, all these emotions that was sort of the global thing. And then when we have like world events where people are really being affected, like the pandemic, you've got people who are really sensitive and picking things up. Then you've got people who are so sensitive that it's sort of like they just don't know what end is up, because they're picking up things from the past, they're picking up things from the present, and they also could be picking things up from the future. Now, the thing that makes an empath and not just a psychic or a medium or an intuitive or even a channel, is that while all of these abilities give us the capacity to be open to more than meets the human eye, like more than is dreamt of in our sort of ordinary philosophy. What makes an empath unique is that where most of these other sort of, clairs and abilities to receive information allow us to know we're picking information up from the outside, empaths process information through our own sensory filters and process the information as if it's our own. And so what happens for empaths is that if you're around somebody who is really feeling scared or anxious or sad or angry or fearful or any other number of emotions, empaths feel it. But suddenly it's like, why am I feeling so blue? Why am I feeling so scared? Why am I feeling so out of sorts? Why am I suddenly worrying about having cancer? I'm completely fine. And the thing is, like, the thoughts, the sensations, the emotions are experienced as if they are ours. And that is the thing that makes being an empath more challenging than just being an intuitive or being a psychic or being a medium, because a lot of times if we're not aware of the fact that we're an empath, which I can explain that in a second, but if we're not aware that we're an empath, what that means is that we don't know what end is up, and we don't necessarily realize that we've been taking on the thoughts, the feelings, the energy, and the sensation from the world around us. So big answer.
I like
Good
it. That was
answer,
very,
though.
very thorough. And
Yes.
now going back to what you said, how would people know when they're an empath?
Well, for one thing, if you've been told you're too sensitive and you're overreacting and you're taking things too personally and pay no attention to the man behind the curtain and there's no elephant in the middle of the room, it's very likely that you have at least some degree of empathic sensitivity. And the thing about being highly sensitive and empathic is that if there is one thing that I am finding in all of the interviews that I've done and all of the clients that I've worked with and all of the, students and classes that I've encountered, there is one consistent message, and that is you are being too sensitive and you are and like you are overreacting. Stop worrying about these things. And the problem with this is that when we are getting a message that our sensitivity is not responding to something that is real, and when we're being told that we're broken for being this way, we do start to doubt ourselves and we start to think, oh, I'm just weird. I'm just a hot mess. I'm just this person who's too sensitive, overreacting, taking things too personally. And as a result of that, a lot of people do not actually know that they are empaths because they have been invalidated and gaslit for such a long time that they don't even imagine that this is that like they don't know the legitimacy of what it is that they're picking up. So in a lot of ways, it starts with just really, I think, being able to recognize that we are an empath starts with being able to validate that, like, even though my, alcoholic family member who's really in a tirade is not willing to own their behavior, I can acknowledge that, yes, there's emotional turmoil going on that they're not owning that I'm picking up on. And I think that that's a really big part of recognizing ourselves as empaths is being able to understand or say that the emotional intensity we're picking up on a lot of times is legit. It's just that we might be around people who are not acknowledging it. But a couple characteristics that, like one thing that I find is a pretty dead giveaway about being a highly sensitive empathic person or an empath is you wake up and you just like everything in your world, everything in your life is fine. Like you're okay. There's nothing, there isn't any major disruption in the force in your own world. And yet you wake up feeling very out of sorts. You wake up feeling emotionally unstable. You wake up feeling just this sense of almost like this sense of dread and maybe rumbling under your feet, like something is coming. My experience with that is that that's one of the ways you can know you're an empath is when nothing in your own life is correlating with the emotions that you are feeling. Now, that said, if you've been through an extremely challenging childhood and you have what's called ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, then what can happen sometimes is that if we've never dealt with our trauma, certain things can trigger trauma that's underneath the surface that then will sort of make us feel uneasy, but because we're trying to keep it down and maybe not even remembering it, that can come up. So I would say that there can be an intersection between trauma and being highly sensitive and empathic, but especially if you've done some work, if you've worked with healers or therapists and you've started to unravel your own experiences, your own triggers in your own childhood, and yet you're still having this experience of feeling things that don't correlate with anything in your own life. From my experience, that is one of the dead giveaways. Or you're thinking things that don't correlate with your own life. Like I had a I have a person that I work with, a mentee of mine, who has a friend who's been struggling with a major health crisis. And, it was like a little while ago, they woke up one morning and they were just suddenly just terrified for their longevity, for their mortality, like what was going to happen to their children. Like they were just going through this like mental rumination of all these things that that they were worrying about, and it was like disproportionate to their circumstances. They were like, this doesn't make sense. They then talked to the friend with the health crisis, and out of that friend's mouth were the exact words that they had been thinking earlier that day.
Wow.
So these are some examples of how we can start recognizing ourselves as empaths.
And so as an empath, how do you, quote unquote, protect yourself?
That is the $1 million question, isn't it? So as an empath, so I actually developed a 5-step system for this exact reason, and for empathic protection and empathic mastery, but it doesn't start with protect. And the reason that it doesn't start with protect is that in order to truly protect ourselves, the first thing we have to do is we have to recognize what's going on. And what I've discovered as I've been working with this system, and as I keep going deeper and deeper into it, I've come to understand that recognize doesn't even just start with recognizing what's mine, what's not mine. Recognize starts by recognizing that we're an empath. Recognize starts by acknowledging that we have extrasensory ability, that we pick up information that is coming from the world around us, that we are different in some way. Once we recognize that, then we need to recognize that we are feeling out of sorts, that we're feeling disoriented, that we're feeling kind of like strange and wonky. Then we start to ask the question, and I like to just put my hand on my heart and I go, is this mine? And most of the time the answer is yes and. Like I'll get like part of it is yours, part of it is from when you were 5 and you had that experience in kindergarten, and part of it is about something outside of you. And then once I ask that question and I get a bit of an answer, I will go further and ask myself, or ask kind of the universe, what's mine, what's not mine. So once we have recognized, then the next step is release. Because, in the same way that like you can't just take a shower and leave the drain plug stopped up and expect the bathtub to not be filled with stinky, dirty water, we absolutely have to drain the bathtub of the stuff that we've absorbed. And if we do not drain the bathtub of the stuff we've absorbed, then basically any kind of filtering or shielding or protecting is going to basically bounce back against our, it is going to cause all the stuff we've already absorbed to just hit the walls from the inside out. So what I found, and this is something, when empaths like try putting up a bubble of light, just bubble up, send out love and light, and it doesn't work. The reason that it doesn't work is that we've already absorbed an incredible amount of distress, and we must release that distress. And I use one of my favorite tools for releasing distress is using EFT, emotional freedom techniques, or tapping, as a way to let that go. But there's also like massage, dance, journaling, walking, breath work, using a pendulum, there's a million, swimming, going into water, taking a bath. There's a million different ways that we can release stuff. So your mileage may vary. Once we've gotten to the point where we are no longer carrying, or we're carrying less of the stuff that we've been absorbing, then we can start to protect ourselves. And in my experience, protect is, it has multiple layers to it. There's the energetic protection of reinforcing, or actually in some cases, building up filters and shields in our energy system that we've never ever had. Because a lot of empaths tend to have very, very porous, permeable, or even like just loaded with holes, auras and energy systems that allow a lot of information to come in. So part of it is about developing effective filters and shields, because I sort of think of us as like there's what we see as human beings, but then I really think of us as being kind of like we're more like an egg in the sense that like there's like, you know, kind of like that little embryo in the center that's kind of the core that we see as us. But then there's kind of like the protective yolk around that that's sort of acting as like a safe filter. Then there's the white that's acting as an additional layer of protection and filter. Then there's kind of the membrane that's on the outside. And then there's the hard shell that stuff should be bouncing off of. So we start to learn how to build up our filters and shields. But the thing is that that's only part of the protection. The other side of it is the strategic protection and the emotional protection, that we must have boundaries in order to actually keep ourselves safe. Because it's like, and a boundary could be as simple as, I am not going to respond to the text message that my hot mess family member is sending at 11:30 at night after getting into a fight with their spouse. Like, I am not going to engage with this. Like, not my circus, not my monkeys. And I have to say that particular Polish saying, not my circus, not my monkeys, is one of my favorite reminders, as well as another one that I really cling to is, your poor planning does not constitute my emergency. Because as empaths, we feel better when other people feel better. So we will often rush into rescue, and we will often take on responsibility for stuff that is not ours. But so there's the energetic boundaries, but then there's also the strategic and emotional boundaries of like that, you know, that be you, bae. You know, you go do your thing. Like, not my problem. You do you. You do you. You know, you want to be engaging in that drama, knock yourself out. Like, and I think that so protection is also even about letting people live their lives, experience their drama, do their thing, crash and burn, and not immediately take on the responsibility for things that are not our responsibility. Yeah.
That is so easier said than done sometimes.
So easier said than done. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and the thing is, and this is, you know, I mean, the word codependent and empath kind of get, you know, thrown together at times. And I really don't love, I mean, I don't really love the word codependent, because I feel like it just is such a, it's been so demonized and sort of pathologized and so negative. But the thing is, in my experience, there is a very good reason why empaths rush to rescue, people please, and go in and try to help people. We feel better when other people feel better. And if we are not dealing with our own pain, if we're not comfortable sitting with our own discomfort, then the thing is that we are going to be incredibly uncomfortable around other uncomfortable people. We don't like distress. And so if we, so there's sort of a two-part piece to this. Part of it is learning how to sit with our own discomfort and our own distress and our own misery and our own loneliness, and letting it be okay that we're feeling the way we're feeling. It makes it a lot easier to let it be okay when somebody else is feeling that way. But if we don't know how to sit with that discomfort, it's extremely natural that we're going to want to go in and fix the situation because it feels better when we fix the situation. Except that, as I'm sure you guys have your own stories, the problem with that is anytime we try to fix the situation, generally we're kicking the can down the road, and things often will go horribly awry after like maybe there's that temporary solution, but then it's kind of like that kind of fix coming from the outside never lasts when somebody is really, the universe is bringing a lesson to somebody to change their own behavior.
Right. And then it never works out. And then you find yourself involved in something that maybe you shouldn't even be involved with.
Shouldn't
right?
even shouldn't be involved in. Yeah, and just like, and suddenly you are triangulated in the situation and you're in the middle of it and you're getting blamed for all of the problems. And that's another reason why I'm a strong believer in, when it comes to being an empath, to not meddle, is that when we meddle, the problem gets put on us instead of being put on what really is going on. And somebody can basically avoid looking at the real issue if we are engaging with it and we're trying to fix it and meddle with it and make it better. Because then when it doesn't get better, we're to blame. We're responsible. Whereas if we just stay out of it and it's like, you do you, boo, like, like, go have your thing. That's your life. That's, so sorry, sucks to be you. If we can do that, then they have to look at their part in the situation. When we rush into rescue, we basically enable somebody to not look at their own part.
Wow. God, James, does any of this sound unfamiliar?
No, not to me, no.
Not at all. No.
Yeah, I have to say, because I swear we just had this conversation. Kelly and I just had this conversation. And I'm an empath, and it took me a long time to realize that.
Yeah.
And it's funny to hear you describe me, even though you don't even know me.
Mm-hmm.
To the T.
Well, and as I talk, because, my whole thing is like, I am all about empaths, all things empath 24/7. And so I talk to a lot of empaths, and I just have to say that the more I talk to empaths, the more consistently I'm like, there are certain things that we all have experienced. And it's like, and yet, most of us were told from the time we were really little that we were weird, that we were strange, that we were different, that we were overreacting, that we were misperceiving the world. I came up with this slogan, catchphrase a little while ago that basically said, don't judge your empathic rainbow by colorblind standards. And what I have really come to understand is, like, we see the full spectrum of color. We see or more. I won't say, because I guess, like, the human eye, we see 1% of the spectrum of what is the frequencies of light and color that is out there. We hear a very limited perspective. So I wouldn't say that we see all of it as empaths, but we see more of it. We have a broader capacity to tune into and perceive things. And one of the other things that I've noticed about empaths is that we have a capacity to put things together and see how things interconnect in a way that the average muggle or the neurotypical person often cannot. And so, like, I mean, how many times have you said something that's just like, duh, this is completely obvious to me, that then you say it to that person and they go, oh my, I never thought of it that way. Like, that's another thing that, like, often we see things and we show something to somebody that is so obvious to us, and yet it never even occurred to them, because they don't see the full tapestry. They only see the one thing in the tapestry at a given point in time. So, being told that we are weird, that we are different, that we are wrong seems to be a very consistent message, as well as that, because I think proportionately there's probably, there's like theory is that there's probably somewhere between 10 and maybe 20% of the population would be identified as what Elaine Aron calls, or coined the term for, highly sensitive person, the HSPs. I would say that empaths are probably even like maybe 10% of that population. Like, I'm sort of imagining like we're between maybe 1 and maybe 2-3% of the entire global population would be identified as empaths. And so it really does mean that if, like, we're 1 in 100, that a lot of times we really are the only one within our local community, especially our family systems, where usually we're not in networks of over 100. Maybe in school there's going to be a few empaths with us, and we'll find sort of the other sensitive kids. But within the family systems, a lot of times we are like the unique one. Although I also do find that it tends to go in family lines. So often empath will be passed from mother to child, and and then so on and so on and so on.
Wow.
And James, we could go into an entirely different tangent, like it would be an entirely other podcast episode
Okay.
about male empaths and the very unique challenges that you guys are up against, because socially you're socialized not even to be like feel feelings. At
Right.
least as females, we're allowed to be nurturing, we're allowed to be emotionally available, we're encouraged to be sensitive and to develop empathy. Whereas, sort of big boys don't cry and suck it up, buttercup, is kind of the message males get so much. So, that's a whole other conversation.
Well, I'm up for it.
It is.
I've
It
been
is.
dealing with this for a long time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And Jennifer, we would love to have you come back. We are out of time, but
I
definitely.
know. It's amazing.
and
This
it
went so fast.
so fast because
did,
I'm
it
listening
did.
to you talk, and the things that you say resonate. And I'm sure they'll resonate with a lot of people because they'll be like, yeah,
Yeah.
right? So, definitely gonna have you come back. And
Oh,
we can
I would love
definitely
to.
continue the conversation.
From the moment that you and we all jumped on Zoom for that initial meet and greet, I was like, you guys are my peeps. Like, it has been such a delicious conversation today. I'm so grateful that we've had a chance. And, my vision is I don't want to necessarily see an empath army because, we don't really do well with violence. But I can imagine, I'm just imagining, what I am here to do is be part of the recruiters for the Empath Nation. That, I sincerely believe that in the same way that we can pick up all the negativity, the toxicity, the pain from the world around us, we also have the capacity to calm our own nervous system down, to shift the energy within ourselves, and to ultimately become beacons and broadcasters for calm, for love, for healing, for peace in the world, and that we really can be part of the solution that turns this crazy ship around and really helps us to get through this birthing process as a species and come out on the other side with something beautiful and amazing, as opposed to sort of staying stuck in the perilousness of the world that we are in right now. So you guys, thank you so much for having me. This has just been
thank you for coming,
delicious.
yeah.
You are
So
welcome. Definitely gonna have you come back.
Awesome.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Oh, you're so
Bye-bye.
welcome.
She was good, Cal.
Yeah.
I like it when our guests, when you start talking to them, and before you know it, things are flowing, and then before you know it, it's over.
Yeah. And I will make sure that if you want to look at all of her websites, her link tree, her book, her podcast, tapping, interested in anything that she said, in the podcast description is the link to all of her things, including all of her social media as well. I enjoyed speaking with her. And we just scratched the surface. Definitely somebody we definitely want to have come back.
Serious. I'm excited to have her help me understand being an empath, excuse me. Because for years I worked with the population where their emotions were just running high all day. And I would just be like agitated, fatigued, and then I'd come home and I never really understood why.
Now you do.
And then when we started doing the podcast, and then who was it? Joe? Joe said, "Well, James, you're an empath." And I was like, "Well, I guess I am."
Yeah, somebody
But now-
told me that too, but I really like Jen's come on, what's the word? Not description.
Not description. Synopsis.
Definition. Thank you.
Definition.
Definition of what an empath is.
Yeah.
It was a well thought out. It was just I've just never heard it put that way. She just nailed it.
You know, if we ever get the chance to put this one on video, it'll be good because you can see her thinking out her answers. They're well thought out.
Yes.
She's just not off the top of her head. You know, she's like, you can see she's formulating the answer to your question in a very succinct and clear way so you can understand it.
Yes, I truly enjoyed having her. We will definitely have her come back. So,
yeah.
Shall we get to random bullshit? You know what? I just wanted to mention something. When we first started this podcast, do you remember the year that we started this podcast? What's that look for?
Because I thought you were going to say something else, but keep going.
So when we first started the podcast, and if you ever go back and you listen to our old episodes to now episodes, and I have not gone back and listened to our first season, right? I probably should, but I haven't. But did you notice how we just don't do like the transitions between, and we don't do the commercials, and we don't do the transitions anymore? No. Remember how I used to do the transitions?
Yeah, you play a little music. Yeah, I noticed that. I thought you were going to say we don't do cryptid creatures, and that's why I was like, oh my God, if you say that, I'm going to flip out.
Well, I was just thinking, you know, maybe for season 8, I don't know. I was just thinking about, I used to like doing that, but then it became a lot with the editing, because editing a podcast ain't easy. I don't know if anybody ever told you that, but it ain't easy.
Yeah, and I wasn't pulling my weight, people, because I didn't know how to do it. Kelly gave me the tutorial, and now I'm doing much better.
You know, but it's something to think about, because I was just wondering, I'm like, did anybody, when you listen to the old episodes, did you like the way it sounded versus how we sound today? And remember, back in those days, we did not have guests.
For the one episode.
Oh, well, I thought for like the one season.
Did we not? Well, I'll have to go back and see. But, no, I forgot my train of thought. Oh, so I have gone back and listened to some of the earlier episodes. And yes, I did notice that we don't do the transition music. And I was actually going to ask you if we stopped doing it because we didn't have the program anymore.
No, we still have it. It's there.
And then, so I think we're doing better, you know, with interviewing and talking, answering questions and that. I think we're better than when we started, but I like the production back then better. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. So another thing that I realized too is back in the day, the podcast was an hour. And we busted it down to, we're about 30 to 40, maybe 45 minutes. But I'm talking with the guest, we were almost like a full hour. And even we were like a full hour, and that just became too much, right? That's a lot to edit. An hour is a lot to edit when you figure it's going to take you more than an hour to edit an hour.
But, you know, I don't think it would anymore for us, because we're getting better interviewing, and we're getting better at not having to edit so much.
That is true. So it probably would be easier now than it was when we first began. And the funny thing is that because, you know, we are on Facebook and we're a part of these other podcast groups, when I go into the groups, I see people who are wanting to start their podcast who really put a lot of production behind their show. And if you listen to some of these podcasts out there, some of them have fabulous production, right? You're talking full, you know, studio production, sound effects, the whole 9 yards. It's great. I don't know if we'll ever be there, James, but we can definitely liven it up. What? What?
We will be there, my friend. We're just not there yet.
We're not there yet. I'm sorry.
We'll get there.
Okay. Well, but we can start to put in some production, maybe not this episode, but the next one.
All right. So kind of back to our roots?
Yeah, maybe. You know, that was just my that's not what I was going to do for random bullshit, but it just something, because I remember when we used to do random bullshit, there was always transition music before we went into random bullshit. And when I said that, I heard the transition music in my head. and thought, I wonder how come we don't do that. And then I thought, oh yeah, I remember, because that shit was hard.
Well, yeah. So, but I have a random bullshit question for you if you want.
Fire away.
Okay. Is there a supernatural event or creature that just freaks you the fuck out?
I don't like zombies.
Oh man, I hate when you do that. I was just gonna say that. I fucking hate zombies too, man.
I don't like zombies. I don't like zombie movies. I don't like zombie TV shows. The only zombie movie now I've seen like Day of the Dead, and I think the last Day of the Dead type movie I saw is when they were in the mall.
Yeah.
Right? Ving Rhames was in it. They got to the boat. They got to the island. Zombies on the island. Back on the boat. That's how like the movie ended. Zombie movies never end well. Ever, 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 ever.
Well, did you see Shaun of the Dead?
That I was gonna say, that is the only zombie movie that I saw that kind of had somewhat of a, and it was kind of a comedy. And I know there have been other comedy zombie movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, I'm good. I am not a zombie person. Zombies, James.
Me either.
Zombies for 100, please.
Yep. What scares the fuck out of you?
Zombies.
Can you put that in the form of a question?
What are zombies?
Ding, 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 ding. See? I watch Alec Trebek.
So that is all we need to talk about on the scary stuff. That'll do it for you.
No, but that reminds me. One time I went to Vegas, and the person I went with, we did one of those timeshare things. Okay. And part of the reason why we did it is they were giving a shitload of stuff, dinner, show, all this stuff. Okay. So we go to dinner and then we go to the show. I didn't notice what the show was. It was zombie burlesque.
How was it?
So we go in. It was kind of funny because it was the guy zombie. His penis fell off, and he was trying to find his penis, and all the other zombies were trying to help him and stuff. But the makeup was kind of freaky, And so it's funny because they're on stage, and then they start coming down into the audience, and they were going to take a couple of people up on the stage and shit, and they're walking around, and I'm thinking, please don't come near me. Please don't. And she fucking looked at me, and she started walking right towards me, and I'm like, oh, I fucking don't. Oh, God, no. And she walked to the dude right behind me, took him up on stage, and I'm like, dude, there would have been so many fucking... I would have been freaking out because there's a zombie. I would have been freaking out because they were taking me up on stage. It would have been bad.
But it didn't happen. See?
No, it didn't happen.
It did not happen. So, my friend, next week we have yet another guest. And I don't know who that guest is off the top of my head, so I can't tell you any information. And that's the thing about this podcast, because we keep it 100. I don't know who the guest is for next week. You're just going to have to listen.
That's called a teaser.
Is that what that's called?
That's called a teaser.
Well, there you go. A teaser. Anyway, do your thing.
Until next time, people, keep your minds open.